morning, everybody, and welcome back to Tlaquepaque on this beautiful day. I'm starting to sound like Mr. Rogers, but I can't help myself. This is an amazing place. This is our 11th live stream presentation. I'm Ken Rowe, and you've met Snickle Fritz. I'll let him go to work. So today is a monumental, pun intended, day because after 340 hours, I'm within about 2 hours of finishing Simba. So in working with the gallery or in Tlaquepaque for the last 25 years, the question most often asked by people that come in is, how do you go from this to a bronze? And my standard answer, which is absolutely the truth, is it's the lost wax process, but there are many important artists involved in making this come to life. So you can imagine everything I'm doing here, the culmination of all those years, all these hours of work, and now I'm about to hand it off to probably the most important artist in the entire process, and he's joining us here today, and that's my friend, Jeff Christensen. Jeff, did you know you were important?
Well, I knew I played a role in this process, that's for sure. There's a lot of people that are very important in this process, and it takes a lot of hands to accomplish making a bronze sculpture. And as Ken mentioned, it's the lost wax process, but there's a lot more things that are lost in the process, ceramic shell, gating, all the other things that happen, which I think you're going to get to see. Throughout this video presentation, not today, of course, but the one thing that is not lost is the mold. The mold is the one thing that's used throughout the whole process to produce every copy that'll be made. A mold has to be made. And
so let me ask you something quickly. How does it feel when an artist comes to you and hands you something like this? The sense of obligation you must have to say, okay, I know the blood, sweat, and tears this person's put into this piece. It must be a real obligation for you to say, okay, I got to do the best job I can because this is really important.
Well, and it really is important. I mean, any mistake I can make, and in making the mold, is going to have to be fixed throughout the whole process. Every time, you know, let's say I inadvertently do something that is going to, it has to be fixed. If it's an addition of 40, it's going to have to be fixed 40 times. 40 so times. I have to be as careful as I can possibly be to maintain what the artist has already done.
So when you look at something like this, okay, well, most people wouldn't understand, having never seen the process, which I'm really glad to say, we're tracking the entire process through to the bronze when this is all said and done. So you're going to take a negative impression of this, right, out of rubber. Okay, so, and you brought some examples of how you would approach a piece like this.
Gentlemen, we got a couple of our usual suspects weighing in. We have Pat and Bruce in Austin, who we all know well. Just saying good morning. Thank you for the best 11 Saturday mornings we can recall. Exclamation points. Your sculpture is incredible. Wow. So folks are already viewing and enjoying.
You give me goosebumps. I appreciate that very much. So the great piece you brought, for an example, is one of Kim Corey's pieces.
That's right. I'm going to show you an example of a two-piece mold, and even though it's hard to read what's actually happening here, this is an owl, and what we've got is the front and back half of this owl.
Okay, so that's the front. So we have the owl here. Let me show you. Basically, so if this were in clay, this is a negative impression of that face in the front, and this is the back. So may we pull this off?
Yes.
The rubber mold part.
Yeah, my part in this process is, of course, making this rubber mold, which is very flexible. It'll pull out and around all kinds of detailed things, you know, all the parts, but the mother mold is what gives it the rigidity.
So this is very flexible. And what's this red on here?
That's a little bit of the wax residue.
Wax residue. Okay, we'll show you that in a minute.
What we make out of the mold is a wax, a hollow wax,
So this is considered a mother mold because it holds this in place, correct?
Right.
Okay.
And this has to be seated properly down in here, otherwise you're going to end up with a warped.
So when that goes together, I mean, it's such a tight seam, it actually would hold water, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So if we put that, let's put that together so people can see. And it keys back in place perfectly.
And the even though it goes together very very tight and will hold water, there will be a seam line that'll have to be stitched up later on.
And you're pouring the wax into here.
Right, and you know, different molds are done differently as far as some. This one I actually paint wax, and I do it open faced and paint, you know, 250-degree wax in, and then I back it up with cooler wax, and then later on put the halves together, slosh in cooler wax, and I have to build it up to a thickness that's going to be right for the casting.
So now we have another mold that you've pulled the wax into, right? Okay.
Gentlemen, we have someone else coming in, Doug Hales. Good morning, Ken and Monica.
Oh, thank
Jeff
you.
from Doug and Katie in Phoenix.
All right, thank you guys.
Enjoying the show.
Thank you. Okay, so now this is a mold of another Kim Corey piece, which is Rapid Transit. We featured here about 3 weeks ago. So you would have taken a negative impression of that.
Yeah, this mold, I've actually made the wax in this, and we're going to go ahead and take the wax out here. Now this mold doesn't come completely in half like the other mold does, because I was trying to minimize the seam line. I didn't want to have Kim have to do a lot of extra work that she wouldn't have to, so I had to
share here if you'd like.
Yeah, I am going to have to sit down because it is a little bit of a delicate process getting this out.
Hold that a little higher if you could. There you go. So can you see that?
Patricia, guys, in St. Louis coming in, just saying good morning, see you in July.
Thank you, yes. It's nice and cool here today, 71 degrees. So you're very carefully. Now this wax, when it's cold like this, is very brittle. And so, oh, that's great. So this is right out of the mold. Look at that.
So this is the mold that does not come completely apart, but I just saved Kim a lot of work because there's no seam line that she has to touch up. But anyway, this is what the wax looks like.
So the antennae are separate molds.
And I do have an example of that too.
Oh, you do? Oh, good.
I brought the injection mold here that you might be able to see the contrast of color, but it's a whole different process for making these injection parts. This is the same process you would do for making jewelry.
So here's breaking news. We just found out. You know what? This piece won best, or People's Choice, right? What was the show? Yesterday at Sedona Art Center. Magic and Dreams. Kim Corey, congratulations. If I had a big blue ribbon, I'd put it right there for you. You deserve it. Thank you. So now, how on earth do you approach a piece of this size? Because you're dealing with undercuts that you can't mold, you've got feet hanging off, everything else that's, you have to think ahead of the casting process and know how it's going to have to be welded back together and everything else.
You know, I like to, when I get something in my studio, I like to study it for, you know, sometimes a day to just try to figure out what's going to make it not just easy for me to make a mold, but it has to be easy for every other step along the way. Somebody's going to have to make the waxes. They're going to have to touch up the waxes. For the casting process, what's going to make it easier for gating, for welding it together after it's cast, you know, any kind of finishing that has to be done. I have to make it easy for every single person downline from me. And that's where experience comes in, because...
And 41 years. 41 years experience.
Just
now,
about 41 years.
Can you imagine, as an artist, me taking the comfort of knowing he has made thousands of molds, and it truly is one of the most important, if not the most important part of the casting process, because in many cases, when you have to cut these into pieces, the original is destroyed.
Right.
So if your original is destroyed and the mold doesn't work out, Yeah, that's a sense of obligation.
Yeah.
So you must feel that every time you do a piece. So again,
Gentlemen,
you're
we
important.
have somebody coming in that I think you'll enjoy hearing from. Diana Farron's from Ohio.
Oh yeah, Diana.
So enjoying the shows each week, and this time she finally gets to see it live.
All right.
So enjoying her Goliath, my Goliath, she says.
Ah, terrific.
Back in the fall to see what other goodies you will have.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you're here because you're going to see how Goliath was made and the mold itself. So now this is live. We're going to cut. Are we going to cut this piece into pieces?
Because we've already thought this out, we are going to be able to cut these pieces. I don't have to study all the aspects of everybody downline because we've already done that. We've already figured out where these parts can come apart.
Well, I assumed, let's go over here. I assumed.
Kim Corey's coming in too, guys.
All right, Kim.
Jeff and Ken, thanks so much for helping people understand the mold process and making all of my molds, she says, since the very beginning of her career.
Exactly, and congratulations, Kim, again. So now I already knew that, I assumed that the right place to cut these forearms off or the feet off was here because of two reasons. Number one, the casting process, but I had to get to the bottom of that foot.
Right.
So as everybody saw last week, and if I will, I think you can see that, Lee, we'll pull this off. And so that's the foot, and I'm gonna have you hold that. In fact, if you don't mind, let's put it over on that chair. So Jeff will make a separate mold of that foot, and then I'm also gonna hand you this one, Jeff. There you go. But where from here? I mean, look at all this we have back here that Jeff has to deal with these undercuts and everything else. So let's see, you're going to want to cut from that side, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to come around here and let's see. Have you ever held a 250-pound lion by the tail?
I wouldn't want to, but
you have now.
Oh,
there's the tail.
Yeah.
We've got the cap by the tail.
Yeah.
So now we're going to lay this here. Okay. So let's lay it right here. All right, guys, this is live, so you're going to see the next step. Okay, so on this show, or on these presentations, we've had painters painting, sculptor sculpting, patina artists with torches, but I got to ask you, what is this for?
This is a Sawzall, and we wouldn't use this on one of Kim Corey's pieces, but on something this large, we can actually get away with using something like this, especially when we have the artist on hand to fix the damages, because when this goes through the clay, it displaces it to a certain extent.
Did you say fix the damages?
Well.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is what Jeff is dealing with right here. That's kind of the armature that's in here. So this is conduit steel. He's got to cut through that. So here we are live. I'm going to hold this foot while you cut that leg off. No worries, right?
No worries.
Okay, here
like
we
I
go.
said, we have the artist on hand here.
Here we go. Okay, there's the wire. There's the wood. Keep going. More wire. There you go. Whew, man, that's scary. Okay.
Yes.
Well, gentlemen, we have a really interesting comment coming in from some folks associated with your gallery here, Ken. Art by Liam.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
Sylvia coming in. Just love you both. Thank you,
you,
Jeff, for making my molds. Thank you, Ken, for
I told you Jeff
representing
was important.
my sculptures and jewelry. Art by Liam.
We're proud to have you.
And then BJ John's coming in. Must break your heart to have to cut and take apart Simba.
Oh, man. You're reading my mind. Okay, so now There's no two ways around what just happened. We have to cut this apart. But like Jeff said, I'm here, so I'm going to clean up that seam. If you'll hold that. I'm going to take the same tool somewhere here that I used to create that texture, and I'm going to clean that off. Now what's great about this is we're going to get a really clean seam line here, so that when this is cast in metal, both these parts, there's a really nice tight seam, and you can see how easily this mends. Again, using the same tool. Okay. So you see how quickly that all goes back together again. And that's after having been cut with this great big thing. Okay, so I think, Jeff, we're ready to pull it off.
Well, let's go ahead and oh, there it is.
There's one.
Very nice.
Woo, that's a scary ride at Disneyland.
They can kind of see
so that's what we had to
went
cut
through.
That steel pipe, and there's other steel bars in here too to hold that up. So Jeff will clean all this up, and you'll make your mold of that, the whole body and so forth. So now you know what that brings to an idea to me. You obviously can't make a whole big rubber mold of this entire thing. You must have to do it in pieces or in sections.
You could do a mold of the whole thing, but nobody would be able to work with it.
Yeah, it's too big of a wax.
Therefore, you
Shirley
have to...
says poor Simba's in surgery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Simba will live, I promise. I promise.
Coming back to life.
Yes.
You know, this is where you have to think about all the assembly later on. You have to make the sections manageable for people to be able to handle all the way down the line. The wax maker has to be able to handle the molds.
Yeah.
For the ceramic shell, you have to think about what's going to fit in the ceramic shell tank.
Yeah. How big of pieces can they cast? Like, say a panel. How big a piece can they cast in bronze?
Well, you know, this leg will come off too. So let's just say it was something like this.
Okay.
You know, but in order to divide this into sections, I'll have to think about it. The head will be a two-piece mold. Some of these are going to be one-sided molds where the bottom is, because the bottom is open, and but yet because of the complicated form, the undercuts, the mother mold, which you saw in plaster before, is going to have to be made in two sections and bolted together so that one half can pull off this way, one half can pull off this way, so you can pull your wax out later on.
So if we had that mold, can you grab the one of Moonlight again? So we can show everybody. So just imagine a great big mold like this, a big blanket mold of these big sections reproducing all these. Is that an accurate description?
Right.
And so from that, the wax will come just like you showed with rapid transit.
Right.
So how long will it take you to mold this big thing?
You know, it's, you know, it might be 3 weeks. I mean, depending on what else I have going on. But every coat of rubber that you put on has to set up.
Yeah.
And in order, you know, so there is some waiting time, but the size of it, of course, plays into it too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that goes into something this large.
So what
Ken,
we're going to
gentlemen,
do?
we got a great question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Diana Farron just saying, what happens to this clay model once it's molded?
Good,
question.
Diana. Well, in many cases, it's destroyed for obvious reasons. Now, this one won't be destroyed in the process, more than likely, other than it looks like we just did by cutting that off. I can put a pin in there in both that and this, like I did in the front legs, and I could pin this back together. It's possible this could come back to the gallery as you see it, so I can continue offering it for sale in the precast while it will be 3, 4, maybe even 5 months down the road before we see it in bronze. So it may come back here. We'll see. We'll see how it survives the mold. But that's the exception to the rule because typically they don't survive the mold. Like your Raven, it didn't. I mean, it was cut into so many pieces that I couldn't get it back together. So I just couldn't do it. So what's going to really be fun is we're going to put a GoPro camera in your studio. And as you work on this every week, it's going to keep you honest because we're going to see some progress, right?
That's right.
You're going to turn it on every morning. And as you're painting the rubber on this, doing the plaster, doing your shims, doing everything you're going to be doing, we're going to catch up with you every week with that GoPro footage and check the progress on Simba's mold. So that's part of the process all the way to bronze, remember. So next week, we talked about doing something for the kids. Would you mind helping me with something here?
I'd
Come on
be glad
over.
to.
All right. So I cannot wait to do this because, again, having sculpted in the gallery for 25 years, I love nothing more than when kids come in, kids of any ages, my age, any age, come in and say, how do you go from a piece of clay to something that looks like that? And literally in 5 minutes, I will have them sculpt, maybe 10 minutes, I'll have them sculpt something that's a semblance of what you see. So for you parents and the kids of all ages, we're going to do a demonstration next week that I think you really find fun. We're refining the materials for you to make it as simple as possible. So, all right, now we have the clay, which we have on our, well, let me go to here. This is the materials list. It's updated, it's very simple. It's on our website. If you have any questions about this, you can email us. Shirley will email you a copy of this. You can print it. It's very simple. But here's the nice thing is, all these materials, other than the hooks, are available at Michael's. So we have, the pieces of wood at Michael's. Much to my surprise, they have plastiline, which is a non-hardening clay, and that's what we're using. It's basically wax. They also have Sculpey. Now, Sculpey acts just like plastiline, but you can cure it. You can put it in the oven to bake it, or you can even use a blow dryer to heat it up and harden it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use all these mediums next week with our kids that we're going to have here live. But in advance of that, this is where, Jeff, you can come in. If you don't mind, one thing we need is your 1/8 inch drill bit. Okay, and now we have the drill. If you don't mind, would you drill a hole right in the middle? Perfect. Okay, now, would you put that in?
Gentlemen, two final comments that I just
Yeah.
don't want to let go here. These
Sure.
are both really nice. For Liam Herbert, just makes us appreciate the cost factor involved in making a
Yes.
bronze. Back
Yeah.
to Simba, of course. And then Damon Sue Lamb, very
Yeah.
informative. We now have a much greater appreciation for the process
Oh.
and your artwork.
I'm glad to hear that. 'Cause
Wanted to make sure I got those in.
That's exactly what this is about, because if you can't go to the foundries, we're going to come to you with all this. So, and this has been fun because this is the first time I have ever documented a piece from the absolute beginning to the end. And that's what you're going to see here with this piece. So Jeff has got this. This is your homework for the week, if you don't mind. Just drill your hole, put this in here, and that's going to be our armature for the face of the lion. So on the materials list, we have this, which is Le Beau Touché. That's the clay, all right? And so that's available at Arizona Sculpting Supply. Arizona Sculpting Supply. So prior to the show, like a half hour before we go on air, if you want to do this live, you're going to cut this in half, the brick of clay you have. You're then, if you don't mind peeling that plastic off, now this is wax. So even though we call it clay, most people associate clay as being water-based. This is oil-based, which is great. Thank you, Jeff. So again, about a half hour before the show, you're going to take a Ziploc bag. You're going to take half of that brick of plastiline, put it in the bag, seal it. Now, if you'll hold that, you're going to take a tub of water, probably about 2/3 full, hot tap water. And you're going to take this, to soften it up, you're going to drop it in that. And in about a half hour, that'll be very soft and malleable for you or your kids to use. So that's your homework. I can't thank you enough. Jeff, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you, Ken.
We'll look forward to watching the progress as this goes. We'll invade your privacy with the GoPro to do that, but we're going to catch up with you every week.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That was great. So do you think this is going to be pretty simple for kids? I think so, don't you?